Welcome back, Fairfax community. Well, we've got, I don't want to pump up his tires too much, but we've got a star with us today, both from the sporting and the media community. And I think we've got him at a junction in his life. He was a decorated football player, and I can't even tell you the number of games he played. I know it was over 200, but it's only one part of the puzzle. He's just finished up well over a decade in the mainstream media, both TV and radio. He's also a wellness fanatic. So we're going to delve into that as well. Luke Darcy, thank you for joining the Fairfax today.
Nice to see you, Ross. Thanks for having me on.
Just a bit of housekeeping first, Luke. You grew up in South Australia?
Yeah, born in South Australia. Both my parents were from Victoria, and my dad moved to play and coach football in South Australia. And so, yeah, I was born there. I had an older brother that was born in Melbourne. Always had strong ties to Melbourne with our grandparents, but yeah, was a proud South Australian, but moved to Melbourne as a 17-year-old and been here ever since.
Your father did the football thing in the reverse, is that right? So he was with, well, it was Footscray in those days from 1963 to 72 and then moved back to the South Australian League. Is that right?
Not moved, but he was from Sunshine and Western suburbs of Melbourne, the Western suburbs
Oh,
of Melbourne, and yeah, debuted as a 18-year-old and right next to his home and so in those days he worked for BHP. That if job opportunity, he had a bit of a personal tragedy in his own life. He lost his wife to a brain aneurysm while he was on the ground playing mid-match. It's quite a unique story and ended up the runner came out. He didn't come off the ground in those days, and so that was a fairly life-changing moment for him, as you'd imagine, I think a then 22-year-old, and that sort of prompted a move to South Australia for a bit of a change. So he went over to captain coach South Adelaide, and I was lucky enough to sort of be father son to both those clubs in the end. As a kid in South Australia, I played for South Adelaide, and then when I was recruited by the Bulldogs, I was father son to the Bulldogs as well.
when did you realise and when did you know that you had the desire to play at the top level of football?
Youngest memory I can ever possibly think of. I used to tell people when I was 5 years old, I think, I'm going to be an AFL player, uh, VFL player as it was then, and you get people laugh at you as people did. And I remember very clearly, my older brother would give it to me, and who do you think you are? But it was in my mind. I just loved it. I don't know how at that young an age, but it was the thing I dreamt about the most. And then you stop telling people once you realise people maybe think you're a bit full of yourself as you get older, but it was certainly the dream from a young age.
That the famous actor Tom Hardy talks about that, doesn't he? He said, "Don't share your dreams and your aspirations with people. They'll find a way to knock them down."
Haven't heard that quote before, but it probably happens, doesn't it? Is that you're so pure when you're young, and people are, and we do that all the time to kids, don't we? What do you want to be when you grow up? And when a kid shares it honestly, the first thing we often do is laugh, isn't it?
Mm,
So
mm.
yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but it was definitely from a young age, and it was probably really more my older brother than Matt, who was a champion junior player and 5 years older than me. So you probably look up to your older brother. Dad was very humble and quiet, even though he worked in the media and called the footy. And I used to go along a lot and sit in the back of the commentary box, and that sort of sewed the media commentary thing deep into my brain. That was something I wanted to do as well, and thought about even before I started playing. I thought about the commentating part as well, which is a little bit weird. And I used to call the game in my own head when I was playing, which was slightly distracting as well. So I think probably following the older brother was the chase of wanting to be like him.
So, tell us about your first game for Footscray or the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, it was at Waverley. A lot of people listening to your show probably don't remember that as being the AFL headquarters, showing my age, but it was against St Kilda. I came on. Chris Grant, one of our greatest ever players, had come off with a concussion, which was rare in those days. You didn't tend to come off with a concussion, must have been bad enough. And Danny Frawley was his opponent. Danny was probably responsible for the concussion. And and I came onto the ground as a very underdeveloped, really not ready to play. And I think Danny said within 30 seconds, "I'm going to kill you." Uh, and we end up being great friends and great mates. I still think about the great Danny Frawley a lot. I was lucky enough to work with him on Triple M for a decade and, a long time after that. But I was far from ready. I was a boy playing on, a proper man, aggressive, ready to go. We won the game. I got dropped the next week, and it was a pretty slow start for me in AFL footy.
Can we just drift off there in regards to the advancement and the research that we've now seen into concussion and head injuries? And Danny was certainly a focus of that with what happened. Um, in the old days, as you say, when you came off the ground, it was normally an old trainer with a hot towel giving you a bit of a rub on the head, wasn't it? And then you kept going. Does it concern you, the research that they've found in regards to concussions and potential long-term head injuries?
It concerns me about those that are affected, and it's heartbreaking when anyone doing what they love has a life-altering injury, whatever that is. And so there's definitely no doubt we've had players, and there's a lot of friends of mine I know in that situation. So I'm very much full of empathy for their situation. I say this in a really cautious way
Mm,
because there is an old saying, if you risk nothing, you risk everything as well. And I think all of us signed up to the benefits and love of AFL. For idea, what that's done for my life is just so life changing in the extreme. I understand we know more about it now. We've got to be cautious. We've got to take the appropriate measures to make sure we don't get more people injured. And I think the AFL, to their credit, has done that particularly well. There's always a risk in everything you do, and I think we've got to put it in that bracket. I think there's a lot of fear out there now. I speak to a lot of mums at junior football that don't want their kids to play contact sport. And I think you're probably more at risk sitting at home on a screen all day
mm,
than the risks of competitive sports. I think you've got to put the benefits in always with the benefits of kids playing team sport, whether it's AFL football, being amongst their mates, for me, far outweighs the risk. And that's not to diminish that there are people that have had a horrific time with that. And I think about those people a lot, but no, it's not something that concerns me at all.
mm. Um, can you give me a couple of your highlights from your AFL career? I don't want to brush over it, Luke, but this is just one piece of your AFL
How
career.
long have you got, Ross? It's a small
Well, we'll
window.
move on to Triple M and your
Well,
engagement with
certainly
Danny.
get brought back to earth when you work in the media pretty quickly. Look, I loved it. Was far from a great player by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt really satisfied that for whatever ability I had, I felt like a guy got everything out of it. To have played for 14 years full time is just a gift. When I think about it, I think about these incredible friendships that have lasted a lifetime, and they're such unique friendships when you spend that much time together. I travelled overseas with two of my old teammates and our wives just before Christmas this year. They're 30-year friendships now. Stories get better. Some of them we try and forget, but it's such a brilliant part of your life. I look back on it and just feel so lucky to have, as a 5-year-old, you wanted to do it. It was better than I hoped for, and I loved every minute of it.
Um, do people get lost in retirement because that all-encompassing camaraderie and involvement and your whole life of the football club can come to an end? And as we know, percentage-wise, there's only so many people that can go into the media or remain at the clubs.
Oh, no doubt. And I think I understand that because it's such a unique thing to do to turn up at work. I always used to say, and I still do, that your worst day at a football club is often someone's best day. I did my ACL twice at the end of my career, and it probably brought it to a stop a bit quicker than I'd hoped for. But even then, you're running around the town, you're recovering, you're with your mates, you're in the gym, you're focusing on your fitness and health, you're getting paid incredibly well. Like it's your worst day ever in footy for me doing my ACL. But when you think about it, it wasn't that bad a day. And I used to think about that all the time. It's like, in context, it's a privilege to do it. But I understand when it finishes, like they're unique friendships. A lot of people, some of the most prepared players I played with that had degrees and jobs to go to still struggle because they were like, it's just not fun anymore. Hard to replicate the fun of being in team sport. I know it comes with some challenges as well, probably the pressure and the scrutiny's more than ever, but I just look back and see it as a great privilege and fortunate enough to enjoy the next chapter as well.
Are the clubs more equipped and able now to assist players with the transition or prepare them for transition out of the game?
A lot more sophisticated now than they've ever been, and need to be. And it's a credit again. The AFL is often the target of criticism where we like to go after them, and at times it's warranted. But I think the resources now for players to educate themselves. I think I know the Bulldogs scenario pretty well. I think there's 43 or 4 on the list, and I think 41 of those would be doing some form of tertiary education, or every one of them doing something that has got an eye to the future. And ultimately, you can't force people to develop themselves. Still got to come from within. But I would imagine that the stats are so much better now that players generally have an understanding that this is a short period of your life, and they probably cope better than ever now.
With You mentioned it earlier before about the dangers of people being on screens and computers. How hard is it for a high-profile player now with uh, phones and social media?
Oh, look, I think we might look back and think the invention of the iPhone, sure, it's come with some good. I'm not being too pessimistic. I'm glass half full, but geez, if you spelled out the troubles that it's given people and continues to do, and we're all part of it. We all get stuck on our screens. But I just think for the current athlete to finish a game and literally have everyone being able to dial into your inbox, and people say just get off your screen, but that's the world of how you communicate. And there's brilliance in that. You can connect better than you've ever been able to connect before. But the pressure that comes with that, the harshness of that world is really brutal. And I think there's a body count of people that are really struggling with that. And I think athletes, a lot of people would say, are paid well and get on with it, and so be it. I've seen some of the most resilient, proud, successful AFL players genuinely affected by what happens to them online and what happens to them on the screen, and worse for people in the general population who, this sort of sewer of a hatred that gets spread. I think is a great curse on our society. I'm really challenged by it. You need some resilience to deal with it. I hope there's a pushback. It's what I love about the forum you're doing, Ross, is you're telling hopefully positive stories, and people can find more positive stories. I think we need more of it.
How proud were you when Sam was drafted to the Bulldogs?
Yeah, really proud. Proud of him as a young person. He's the oldest of our 4 kids. Proud of all of them. I think you genuinely. My dad, as a former player, was very supportive in the most passive way. He never ever once said anything to me about a game or ever imposed any of his world on my world. And when he passed away a few years ago, I probably reflected on that. I thought it was a pretty great gift in the end, just to let me make all my own mistakes. And so that's the sort of dad I try and be. But I must admit, it was quite emotional the first day. I dropped into training. That piece of grass in the western suburbs, the Whitten Oval, has seen decades and decades of our family there and great memories. And yeah, he's carving out his own future. Yeah, we're proud of him as a young lad. He's a good person. He's passionate about what he does. I'm proud of the other 3. Whatever they choose to do, if they find a passion, it's obviously a bit interesting when it's close to your passion as well. But I think as a parent, you just want them to find something they love, and whatever that is great in my mind.
Well, your second eldest, who has reminded you, I remembered listening to you on the Hot Breakfast, is a world champion too. Highlighted that there are no other world champions in your house.
She did that again over summer, actually.
Really?
Sienna, our beautiful daughter, who's away studying. She was a rower and had this great experience at school, and this group of 8 girls got together, and it was one of the great weeks. So lucky enough, my wife and I to be at Henley on the Thames in the an hour out of London, central London, and I know nothing about rowing, nothing about the sport, still know nothing about the sport at all. But to see her and this group of girls from a really small school take on the world's best was just a great achievement for her. And it's growing up with 3 brothers, you become pretty resilient. She's capable of giving some feedback to all the boys. We're all scared of her. She holds her own pretty well.
Just going back to Sam for a second, you're talking about how your father was very supportive, but in a quiet way. There is some footage of you in the Triple M box when I think Sam kicked a particularly spectacular goal and you remained mute.
Well, people probably think you're working really hard to do that. It's probably my nature is I'm not someone who's going to jump off the stands, and it's just who I am. I'm probably not an over celebrator. Having said that, I love Peter Dacos, and one, he's a
Mm.
great person. I was lucky enough, so I love that's naturally him being him. That's naturally me being me. But there's a layer to it when you're working in commentary, trying to do the job, and I've obviously finished doing that now after close to 17 years. So I was finding that quite uncomfortable, to be honest with you. You're calling the game. You've signed a contract where you're scheduled to do some of those games, and I was reluctant to do it. I pushed back against it most of the time. But in fairness to the Triple M and Channel 7 who employed me, it's like there's some human interest. We want to see you call the game. It was probably part of the reason why I was ready to move on and just go to the footy as a dad and not try and juggle being a commentator and have a son playing as well.
How smooth was your transition from football into media?
Well, doing my knee twice fast tracked it, and again, it was that perspective of saying I've got this lucky life. Yeah, I could get really down in the dumps and I'm not playing, and I was nice and unhappy about it, and I felt like I was probably at the peak of your powers at that stage, and if I had any, was playing and felt physically great. So that was a frustration, but it gave me a chance. I'm forever grateful to Dave Barham, who's the current president of the Essendon Football Club, was the head of sport at Channel 10, and yeah, he saw something in me. I always along the way would put my hand up for a media chance, even as a very young player. So I would be in happy to make coffees for someone on their radio show or put my hand up all the time. So I got to know a lot of those people, and Dave probably got to know me through there. And then I called the footy for, most of that season as an injured player, which hadn't been done before. It was 2005, I think, off the top of my head. And the club were really supportive. They wanted the Bulldogs to have a bigger presence in the media. And then I did my knee again that Christmas. So I got 2 years of really incredible experience as a current player. So you probably get forgiven a little bit for how unprepared you are. And Dave was a great champion of young people. He tried to get young people into the chair really quickly. So it fast tracked the transition. I went back and played one more year, but I was not moving that well. So it made the transition a bit smoother.
Do you think that was a bit of a breaking through the wall for others? Because I've noticed over the years, people like Jimmy Bartell and I think even Rewalt were getting involved in the media before their playing careers had finished.
It's funny, isn't it? When something happens for the first time, there's always 50% of people, you're putting yourself ahead of your team. Who do you think you are? That sort of criticism. I used to liken it to, if you were doing a commerce degree and working at Minter Ellison in the law firm, you're going to win the humanitarian of the year in that time. It's like, well, my path is I want to pursue media, and this is work experience for me. And I'm injured. I see it in the same light, and I was lucky to have some supportive people that did. And a current player, it makes sense, doesn't it, that you might get an insight of someone who'd played on someone the week before. So I didn't see the backlash coming. It didn't worry me too much, but it's pretty commonplace now.
The famous footy show conceptualized and done out with Eddie McGuire was very forward thinking, wasn't it? And having current players on the panel and accelerated a lot of them into their own long term careers, didn't it?
It was amazing for all of us. They were lucky enough to appear on that show, and I was lucky enough to be on it many times and sit in the back office pre-show with Eddie and Sam. It was where I connected with Eddie, and we obviously did breakfast radio for not obviously for those who don't know, I did a breakfast radio for 11 years with Eddie, having met him as a 19-year-old. So that, yeah, the footy show was an amazing thing for a generation of players, even the ones that didn't. There's only a handful of people that really are interested in the media. I think there's a bit of a misconception on that. It's not a given that that's a path for many. It doesn't suit a lot of people, but even the ones that were wanting to promote a business or had a landscaping apprenticeship or just wanted to be exposed more to the community. That was an amazing thing for all of us.
He pushes many barrows, Eddie McGuire, doesn't he? He's promoted and helped a lot of people to success.
Yeah, never met anyone quite like him. I spoke to him this week, and Carla is his beautiful wife, and with the success of Joe, who's his eldest son, and people might have caught up with great stories. Just won the national championship in the US at college football, Ohio State. I think is the college that Joe's at, and I got lucky enough to get to know Joe, and I bumped into Xander yesterday. Coincidentally, the Joe's younger brother. They're a great family, great people, and lucky enough to spend some time with them.
How special was it working with Sam Newman, both on TV and radio?
Yeah, I think Sam, as life's gone on, is one of the most misunderstood people I think I've met. He's we used to get dressed in his locker room. Everyone, the hundreds of players that came through the footy show, you always got dressed in Sam's locker room with Sam. He liked the players to come through, and you got to hang out with him. And he was, I did a full year with him on radio on Triple M, and it was just fun because you never knew what was quite going to happen. A lot of people worked with him for a lot longer than me, but I always found him to be incredibly generous. Always had something. He's a great loyal person to his friends, and yeah, behind the scenes, Sam's helped an enormous amount of people that he wouldn't be interested in the credit for, or wouldn't care for any credit. But I think, like anyone who's probably had a big public profile, I think he gets incredibly misunderstood. He's inherently decent person who's had a pretty amazing life.
It's easier to find the negative, isn't it, with a quick grab?
Well, I think that's the same with all of us. There's plenty of negatives. If I could open up on all of them. We've all made mistakes, all said things we regret. All every day. But I think 90% of people are really good. I think, or have got good intentions, have maybe made a mistake, and I think the cancel culture of the last decade's been horrific because it's everyone's going to get cancelled at some stage. If we keep that up, it's ridiculous. Like if you make a mistake and you genuinely move on, that's how you learn. I think it's got out of control. I think the tide's turning away from that now. I think people have just there's a body count of people who just got a black line put through them really unfairly in my mind. So Sam's the opposite of that. He's uncancelable, and more power to him.
Um, Listening repeatedly still on YouTube to many of the rub highlights, did it not seem like a job at times?
Well, I was a player when JB and Jazz and Sam and Spud and those guys were, and BT, and so yeah, like I can remember you drive home from a game and they might be doing the worst on ground votes. I said this to them. Jason Dunster was got to work with all these guys, which was a great privilege and so much fun. But it was where the players listened. I think it's still quite often where the players listen, because to me, what you're trying to capture is that locker room humour and it's misunderstood again. It's like 99.9% of it is aimed at each other in the most good-natured way. Now, it sounds brutal, but it's sort of the way I think males showed their love for each other, to be honest with you, rightly or wrongly, for decades. And I think that captured that. There were some great friendships through that era. I remember driving home, having had a shocker, going, do I turn it on and see if I get the three worst on votes? And I think it might have been Sam delivering them, and like you were filthy, but you couldn't help but laugh. And it's that sort of black humor. It's my sense of humor. So I was lucky enough that there was an opening to call the footy with the guys and got to spend a lot of time. They were brilliant to me, all of those people. Gaz and Chief and JB and Sam, all of them were great friends over a long period of time now.
There was a famous one that I still listen to about where Gary did a quiz, and it was about you and your 1 year of captaincy, and then they all piled on. I think Spud even called you mud flap or something. But you then recalled it the next night, and Gary Lyon tried to wriggle out of his responsibility and put it all on Jason Dunstall.
Which is maybe people don't understand. That was the sense of humour. If you turned up and there wasn't a rundown in front of you, you went, oh, I'm in trouble here. The rundown to you.
It was you, was it?
And you're always looking all over your shoulder. And if you knew what was on the rundown, you felt slightly safer because perhaps it was going to be aimed at someone else. And that's what you did. You just, you took the piss as intensely as you could. And that stuff's funny. Like, to me, having the piss taken out, being able to laugh at yourself, when the boys look at the stat sheet and I had one handball in my first 3 games. Now you can defend yourself and talk about the sub rule. No one wants to hear that. People want to hear how shit you were in your first 3 games, and that's funny. And it's funny because they're mates of yours and it's contemporary. And so I hope we don't lose that. I think that's that sense of humour of being able to laugh at yourself and in a good natured way is a really healthy thing. I feel like we've lost that a little bit, but I loved it. I love being in the firing line. I deserve to be. I was a two-time head wobbler of the year. Proudly can say that from Danny Frawley. When Spud, the great Danny Frawley, had you in his sights, it was just funny. Often he didn't say anything intelligent or didn't know where he was going, but a lot of fun looking back at all that.
Speaking of fun and not knowing where it's going, how much fun was it working with Mick Molloy on the hot breakfast?
Yeah, again, I just feel really lucky. You 5 years of age growing up in Adelaide, you want to play AFL football and no real understanding of the history of the degeneration and Mick and Rob Sitch and Santo and all those incredible creative geniuses that they are. And then suddenly you're sitting in this breakfast radio chair next to someone, and I was cannon fodder for Mick. Like he was
Your
so
juice
far.
diets didn't help.
Oh yeah, I gave him plenty of ammunition to nail me. And again, it was probably just what I like. Even when I realised, be careful what you say to him off air, he was still good enough to, the ringtone on my phone would go off and it would be the fray that,
Oh, yeah.
or, hey, get in the booth. We're doing Eddie's done it. Everyone on the team's done this sort of, we're doing a thing on how artists and musicians use some sort of algorithm to improve their voice. And suddenly he's got me belting out this song, which came back to haunt me for years and years and years. And no, he was brilliant. I often say we bonded over some incredible trips. We were able to go to Super Bowls regularly. I love that stuff. The World Cup of soccer, the Olympic Games in London and Brazil, and the dawn service of 100-year celebration of 100-year remembrance of Anzac at Anzac Cove. And so we ended up took the show to these incredible places. No, Mick's as funny off air as he is on air. He's a great friend to be around, and it was a pretty nice chapter. I enjoyed it.
When did you know that that was going to work, that you had the magic ingredient on that show? Because there'd been different members, hadn't there, sort of before they've settled on you three?
First year was pretty rough, and I had no idea. A phone call from Eddie. You come in, I'm starting this breakfast show. I think you'd be good on it. Are you up for it? And next thing you know, you're in the chair. And in fairness to the state, there's no guarantee. You put three people in a room, and look, everyone's got an ego. All of us, that have been around maybe slightly more elevated. I'm including myself, absolutely front and center. But also, you put in early mornings. You're under pressure. The style of the show we're doing was really current around everything that was happening in Melbourne. I loved it because I'm passionate about many things outside of football. So we would have a rolling guest list coming through that could go from Shane Warne to the Prime Minister to Albie Mangles to whoever else on a daily basis. So yeah, these fascinating, interesting people. A lot of fun, most days, but also you're tired, you're working 2 or 3 jobs. So there's a chance you're going to, it's going to spill over at some stage. I think to do 11 years of that and still have friendships out of it is pretty special.
Well, so on the other side of the fun part, how hard is it with a family of 4 and the early hours? How hard was it at times to fit all this in?
Well, I actually felt like that was a pretty family friendly thing to do. Beck may have a slightly different take on that, my wife, if she was in the conversation, but you were out the door at sort of, early 5 o'clock AM, but really you'd finished at 9 and we were really like, we stepped out the second that show was over. We were all out the door. Again, Eddie's genius. He wasn't hanging around for a post-show meeting, as you can imagine. And it was great because you didn't waste time after that. We were often on the phone and checking in with Jay, our producer, all the time. But, you're there for school pickup every single day.
Okay.
You can carve out the time on the weekends to be around junior sport. So even though you're busy, I think I found you're able to be there for a lot of the key moments if you made the time for it.
Was Mick Molloy scripted or was it completely off the cup? Cuff.
I mean, like I've got great respect for that group of people who are funny for a living, and I think got to sit in that chair and talk a bit of footy and ask a question or two. But when it's on your business card, dial in and be funny. That's a high bar
Mm.
to achieve every day, and especially if you have an off day, you don't feel like being funny, And I think that's mixed genius. Like the the guys that are successful, I think, consistently in the comedic world, in my view, not that I know, they're highly, highly intelligent. And Mick would, people would misunderstand. I think, Mick used to tell us he was ducks of his school or ducks of humanities, but super, super smart. And you've got to be able to get your words out and the take on things in a funny way that consistently. So he's a prolific writer. His success on Crackerjack and the Front Bar and all that is because he loves a beer. Clearly, he loves a good time, but he's prepared. You don't have success like that unless you're smart and consistent. And he's pretty good at all that.
What was the dynamic like when Will Anderson then came in?
Yeah, known Will for a fairly long period before that, and he's just again another super smart, really bright and great person. He's a Bulldog supporter, so Will used to host our end of season fundraisers, which is another story, maybe for another time. In the early days, so I got to see Will a lot, and he's brilliant. His shows sell out more than any other comedian around Australia. And so he just sat down, very different style to Mick, different personality type. But I love being around those guys because the way they think and the ideas they've got, and they're professionals. They get the craft of what they want to do. I was just an idiot ex-footballer sitting in the chair, really. And I got the chance to sort of see how creative those guys could be, and really, got great friendships out of it. Will and Mick and Eddie and a whole there's dozens of people off screen. Rosie Walton's one of the best people you'll ever meet. It was on our show for 11 years and maybe the most important part of our show. Rosie, she's just
I
a
got
great person. Jay, our producer, is a great friend for life. I could name another dozen people that you got to spend that time with.
Rosie Walton's laugh is quite infectious, and I got the impression you didn't want to end up on the wrong side of her.
Yes. Yeah, Rosie's pretty direct as well. We all felt her wrath at times, but you're right, it's a laugh. I missed that laugh actually because we used to glance across the desk. 11 years is a long time to spend that time in a studio together. So yeah, I'm rapt that her career trajectory is going up and up, and everyone wants to work with Rosie because she's a champion.
I don't want to brush over this section as well, but we haven't even reached half of your achievements. Why would you leave Channel 7 and Triple M at this stage? And that's a bit of a loaded question. I know that you've got Aleda and you also have your wellness retreat in Bali. Why the change now? What prompted you, or was it many factors?
No, Ross, I've been thinking about it for a while. I people who know me would probably think I probably gaze into the future a little bit, and it was a brilliant job to do. I loved sitting in that box with those guys and great friendship and girls that we worked with for a long period of time. But I always felt like there was an endpoint to it, and I was sort of keen to do it on my own terms. And I have these other passions in life. You mentioned a few of them, our leader space and Bali, and a few others that have been growing in passion and time, and putting, in fairness, putting a lot more credit into them than I was into wanting to achieve anything else in media. And I think once you stop putting credit in, you can't expect to then keep getting the same satisfaction out of it. So my attention was just going elsewhere. Look, in some ways, it's such an enjoyable, fun job to do. And once you're established, you probably could hang in there for maybe another 6 or 7 years with the footy rights, but I didn't think I'd be doing myself a service to do it because it was easy or because the money was there, or sort of always in my mind, you go where the passion and where your heart's going to. And so these other areas, what we do at Aleda, I'm really passionate about. Really wanted to dedicate the time to that. I've got a great partner, Matt Waterwitz. We started that 10 years ago together, and we've been talking about the day when I would be able to dedicate the majority of my time. And so it's exciting to do that. And it's also, I like the idea of just disrupting your own life. It's just start again. You're like the new kid at school now. start this year with all my weekends free. I get the chance to work only for myself. I don't work for anyone anymore. That's massive motivation. My beautiful wife, Beck's the greatest champion you would ever meet, and she's been on weekends on her own a lot for our whole life together for 7 months, and done an incredible job in every part of our life. And so I love spending time with her as well, and probably felt fair that that was about the time, and yeah, a few other factors as well. So yeah, it was nice to be able to end on a positive note on grand final day last year, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Before we move into the wellness space, just quickly, you've also got a thriving family business with your three siblings. Where does that sit? Where has that sat for you, and where does that sit for you now in regards to perhaps more time?
I sold out of our hospitality
Oh, okay.
group as sort of
Yep.
part of this move,
Yep.
was lining up a bit of that. And look, again, pretty lucky to have great relationships. I've got an older sister, an older brother, a younger sister, and we grew up in the pub game as kids. We used to live upstairs, and all of us probably thought this is the worst job in the world. We'll never do it, but it's somewhere in the blood. It was there, and then all worked together. And everyone who's listening, who's ever been involved in family business, will know that it's not short of hurdles to jump over at times. But we'll get on really well. Really proud of that. It was a great time to exit. So my brother still is the last member of the family in the pub game. So Matt's still doing his thing with the Precinct Hotel. So which is great, but it was nice again to end in a really positive way.
Can you tell the listeners about Aleda and what it's about, and also about all the amazing guests you have had and are continuing to have on the podcast associated with the program?
Yeah, I'll try and do a shorter version, Ross, if I can. It started 10 years ago. Matt Waterwitz is one of my oldest friends. We played at South Adelaide together, and Matt tragically broke his ankle in our last game together at South Adelaide. He was a champion of our junior teams, was drafted to Essendon as an early pick, and his AFL dream ended with that injury. I came across as a father-son, but we stayed in touch. We were lifelong friends, and Matt's great at staying in touch, and so we'd always catch up. He went to Teachers College, became a legendary educator. Adelaide's a small place, but he would have an enormous impact on kids, to the point where he was asked to be on a reform board around what a great educator looks in Australia. They were managing out kids at his school in year 10. Very short version of that story, became a great champion for those kids. 25 kids that were going to be booted out in year 10 all finished year 12. 80% of those went on to tertiary education. And Matt just said to the principal, I'm not handing him back next year unless you let me coach our teachers on how to connect with the kids. Are fine. We've let them down, and we need to. And it just really resonated with me as a father of four. And Matt was then really the go-to person. Get Matt to your school to coach the teachers on how to connect better and collaborate with the kids. And we started this thing called Aleda, which is about coaching teachers really. And several thousand educators went through the program. Our first employee was Damien Hill, my Year 6 PE teacher. He's still part of Aleda, one of the great people you'll ever meet. And we sort of organically got drawn into a range of different spaces, normally from a parent that would be in one of our schools and see the impact of our program for their daughter or son. And so we ended up in 24-hour bottling places, back into sport, into this range of areas. And then through the COVID era, like a lot of people, we had to sort of think outside the square. We couldn't get into any of those spaces physically. So we connected some of the sporting people we worked with. The first group of Aleda was Justin Langer. Don Pike had just finished up at the Crows. John Worsfold and Ben Rutten were doing the handover as coaches at Essendon. Trent Robinson's a legend of the NRL, was a 3-time premiership coach. Will Weaver was the Australian basketball coach. And we put them together in this collaborative forum just to try and justify our means, really. And those guys, just the way they were able to share and help and support it. A few of them know each other really well. A few of them didn't. And then they just started sharing it. They just sort of, one of them said, oh, Ange Postecoglou's a mate of mine. And the second group had Eddie Jones and Luke Beveridge and Neil Craig and Brian Goorjian, the Australian basketball coach. And Aleda's then, over the ensuing, I've lost track of time, a few years, sort of gone into communities all around the world, from at the name dropping end. Mikel Arteta from Arsenal is a great champion of Aleda, who puts his 11 coaches through the program, and they take it to longevity specialists and principals of the Green School in Bali and conductors of orchestras. And so we have these diverse groups. I always think of a beautiful lady called Omar, who I had on the podcast with me, who founded Safari Doctors. So putting people together in these collaborative forums of 5 or 6. We host these forums for an hour and 15, normally once a month with these groups. And we've now got this community around the globe of several hundred who get together to learn. The term I use a lot is learn and connect and collaborate. And I love it. It was one of the real reasons wanting to find more time. It's just great things are happening. We feel when you put great people together, and the podcast that I host, the Empower and Leaders podcast, is probably every second guest would be part of our community. So being able to get, through these incredible leaders, some really great stories. And I love it. I love telling the stories. I love, when we form groups and bring good people together, it just feels like a really worthwhile thing to do. And yeah, we've sort of expanded our team in the US and the UK with a couple more facilitators, and it's a really positive thing.
So not just schools, but any sort of organisation can become involved with you guys and put people through the program?
Yeah, we're still running some of our collaborative leadership in schools, but really 90% of a leader now is a leader connect, which is these connected groups. And so we'll have principals of schools or an entrepreneur who might have started a fruit and veg business. Hamish Gadsby from the Happy Apple is expanding his, he's a great champion of a leader, been in a second group now to elite sporting coaches to creative people or tech entrepreneurs. So for us, we don't really have any care at all about someone's title or their bank balance, or more about curious learners getting together who really sign up to connect and to try and learn from each other. And that can happen. Marcus Bontempelli in a group with Pat Cummings, Australian cricket captain, Bulldogs captain, but Rob Sitch, who's the legend from Working Dog, and Andy Lee. So you've got different age brackets and different people who learn from each other, and I think that's what we're seeing is a really, really beneficial thing.
How much time is that taking up for you now in your new
Yeah,
day
it's
job?
it's the focus every day. It's really the lucky enough that our place in Bali's a real passion, and definitely spent some time there. But a leader's really like any of those things, you can put 100 hours in and feel like you didn't get anywhere in a week because there's so much to do. But that's a good thing. We're a great team. The podcast is a really enjoyable part of that, telling those stories. And so, yeah, it's got some flexibility because I don't have to be on a flight going to a game to call footy. So I've got a bit more flexibility in my life now, which is great.
Speaking of your wellness journey, I'll try and pronounce it correctly. It's Sukhavati.
Did a pretty good job, Ross. Yeah, Sukhavati Bali is our place in Canggu in Bali. For those that don't know Bali well, it's not too far from the airport. Seminyak and Canggu, a lot of the expat Australians have moved to Canggu. So probably 13 years ago when we opened, it was just a tiny little village, really. Beautiful parties. I think we're up to 53 members of that village who work at the retreat, and people from all around the world come to look after themselves better. And lucky enough, our kids sort of grew up going there and being on the massage table, eating some organic, vegetarian food. And yeah, it's become a place we love. We love spending time up there. And I think, a bit like Aleda, I think, but people, leave there feeling better, feeling healthier, maybe wanting to make a few changes in their life. So it's been a great passion.
So where did your wellness journey begin?
I think when you're an athlete and your body and what you eat is something you think about every day, and how you prepare, how you recover, how much you sleep. I think it's naturally something that's part of you every day, because without it you can't play, and you can't play at the level you want. So I think it started pretty young, and then just over time, I think, introduced to transcendental meditation at a young age. David Smorgan was the president of the club, and introduced that into the club, which is pretty random, western suburbs of Melbourne.
Very innovative. That was a long time
It
ago.
was right back, in the late 90s. And that just stuck with me. I didn't over analyze it or think about it, but that's been something that I've done regularly for, what's that, nearly 25 years now, and been a great benefit. And I think that opened up my wife Beck's a teacher of that. She's into her yoga. She's used to be in the personal training and musical theatre space. So I think she comes at the world from a fairly healthy perspective as well, but in balance. I still love a beer. I love doing all the things I do with my mates. But I just think if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And so it's not a fanatic by any stretch. But I got a routine that I think helps me to probably be more happy than if I didn't do it.
Do you think wellness has a bigger place now in sporting clubs?
I think no doubt. I think probably the holistic look at it is where the opportunities have been, and they're a bit more commonplace now. I think if you did a yoga session in the 90s or meditation, it was like, what's going on with him? He's lost the plot a little bit. Whereas I think all those methodologies are proven, zero side effects. There's some, people understand sleep better now than they ever did, and LeBron James has put that back on the marketplace with him talking so openly about the 11 hours of sleep he has a day and the nap that he has after that as well. And so I think there's just now more holistic chance. I think it's probably in our era, if you're in some sort of pain, take an anti-inflam, take a painkiller. That's still got a place, but I think, look at some of those athletes playing 350 games more regularly. Travis Boak over at Port Adelaide with his own wellness set up in his own house, and you see players are working out, that there's longevity in looking after yourself better, which is a smart thing.
There's a lot more players with the infrared saunas too, aren't there?
Great research on that. We're lucky enough to be able to afford to put one in at home a few years ago. They're brilliant. It's and look, it's a lot of money, but comparatively, if you read the research on twice a week or 3 times a week having a sauna, the health benefits are off the charts. It's a great thing. I love, particularly in the cold climate of Melbourne, the sauna's an awesome addition. Love it.
The cardiovascular and the reduction in mortality and morbidity is quite amazing, isn't it? With certain periods of time in a sauna.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? I think all those the Nordic countries have been on to this forever, and suddenly all these studies coming out that are now, carrots are good for you. Who would have thought? It's if you actually stop and think about, most stuff makes sense, doesn't it? The idea of sweating out some of the toxins from your day, and you feel you sleep better, and a lot of those things are free. I know your passion for breath work is it's free. Like sign up to your course. I'd encourage you to go to someone who knows more about it for sure. But there's opportunities to wake up with the sun, try and eat less processed food, do a bit of exercise. A lot of it's not that complicated, is it? But
No,
it's just
no.
finding the discipline to do it.
Where do ice baths fall into your regime?
Yeah, in and out. I hated them with a passion at the end of playing. I think when something's forced on you, you just resent it. And now I love the cold water therapy. I think I was sharing with you before I started the interview. Lucky enough to spend a day with Wim Hof and do the ice bath with the Iceman, going back quite a while now, and that was a unique experience. So I love just come back from the beach. I love the cold water, and something special about that for sure.
Luke, how important is reinvention in one's life?
Yeah, I think it's a big thing for me. I think, if you've got a passion that you love, and, it's probably your story too, isn't it? And there's so many reasons people will tell you not to change. And, it's some interesting calls with people. Why are you leaving media? What are you possibly thinking? Like, that's the dumbest decision. And, people are free with their feedback. And it's like, it was pretty easy because all the things that I want to do are in front of me. And so, yeah, I think that idea of disrupting your own life is the way I think, not for good. You can't be silly. Everyone's got, I'm at a stage of my life now where the kids are finishing school and I've got more freedom and more financial freedom to do it. But I think getting stuck in things that you don't want to do, where your heart's not. You see a lot of people in workplaces who look really sad and miserable and stay there for 30 years.
Mm.
I've never understood that or related to that. I know it's hard. I know people, the wage becomes their security, but it's a long life doing something you don't love. So I've never been able to stay in something for too long I didn't love.
What's that saying? A salary is an employer's dream, an employer's way of killing your dreams.
Yeah, yeah, possibly, isn't it? But I think there's other people that turn up every day, and that's what they love to do. They work in an organisation that fills them up. They work with great people. The salary suits them fine. And the entrepreneurial path's not for everyone. It's got a lot more risk and ups and downs and stresses attached to it. I think, Scotty Pape was on our breakfast show forever and become a good friend of mine. And I love his line, tread your own path. And I think he's right. It's just what works for someone else doesn't have to work for you. In fact, it probably doesn't. You got to tread your own path. Find out what makes you happy. Find out what fills you up, and have a go at
Um, does the pull of politics ever come to you?
it. No, is the short answer. Look, occasionally, when you live in a state in Victoria that has really diminished in the last couple of years. For the record, I think people see me as some sort of liberal candidate in the waiting. My mates at Triple M have probably enhanced that idea that would be the case. But the times I've been connected have been because it's a neighbour or a friend or someone I know. I love good people and connect with good people and on either side, and so I'm not anti one side or for one side or the other. But yeah, I think our state in Victoria has diminished tragically in recent times, and to be encumbered with this sort of extraordinary debt that is going to be something our kids are going to have to deal with for a long period of time. When you see the rate of sort of social divide that's going on, the gap between people that have got resources and those that haven't, Victoria's never been, and that's not a great thing. It's why we see so much more crime, and we see people. If you give people nothing and nothing to hope for, well, they become really dangerous. And at the extreme end as well, the gaps got wider and wider. And yeah, what happened through the COVID period hasn't been answered properly and hasn't been reviewed. No one wants to talk about the horrific side effects of locking people in their house for 2 years. A lot of our young people haven't recovered at all. It's inconvenient to have that conversation, and that's not on. You've got to have people that you got to have that conversation and review the good and the bad. And so I think we're not in a great place in Melbourne. So the answer is I'm not the person by any stretch of the imagination at all, but yeah, I'm passionate about the leadership angle of it, and I think we've been let down pretty bad. It's easy to throw stones too from the outside unless you put your hand up, but I think we're lacking leadership in a strong way. So not for me, but I hope we get some good leadership.
Do you think it's hard to get leaders into politics? Good people
Yeah,
into politics?
yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And look, I've become friends with Peter Dutton over the last 12 years, and he's someone that I've got a lot of admiration for. It was a great mutual friend of ours, Jeffrey Thomas, who is my partner at Sukhavati Bali. He's an old friend and a great friend. So I got to know Peter through that, and Peter's independently successful financially. Him and his wife Kiralee have run childcare centres, and he grew up as an old school policeman with old school police values. Speaking of misunderstood people, and Peter's probably one of the most misunderstood people you've ever met, and people do a great job of framing him in a way that is very opposite to the person that I've been lucky enough to spend some time with. And yeah, I think people now are maybe starting to listen a little bit deeper and see the values. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I wouldn't be able to withstand the level of impact that has on your family to be in that role for as long as he has. But that's someone that's got a really clear vision and is an outstanding leader in my view. And I wish him well.
Just to touch back on COVID, it's terribly sad to see what has happened in this state, hasn't it? Particularly with small businesses. You go down a lot of shopping strips. There's a lot of empty stores and shops, aren't there?
Yeah, you're gonna get me fired up here, Ross, on this because yeah, I think what did we think would happen? What did when your measurement is to lock people in their homes for the most extended period of time on par with any community around the world, and then celebrate that as success. There was really clear evidence early that that was going to come with some catastrophic consequences, and really, if you look at it realistically, some of the most vulnerable people were the elderly, and that's tragic. But to cause catastrophic consequences to those that are starting their lives as a result of that is a decision you got to think about. And we live in an island continent where just across the border in South Australia, they had half a day lockdown and they'd had enough by lunchtime, and so they opened the door. And so you can't tell me, and then to celebrate the people that made those decisions with Orders of Australia and is really a distasteful thing, and it's not something we should be okay with. I think the head of IBAC, the independent head of IBAC, described Victoria as the most corrupt state in the history of politics, or words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, so I might have added 10% there, but that's an independent actually appointed by that government. We should be listening pretty closely to that, and I think Victoria needs a royal commission like Queensland had after Sir Joe Bjelke-Peter's. I think you've got to go back and actually work out where the corruption is. If that's what the head of IBAC's saying, you've got to go back and it needs that to move forward. Is my view.
What advice do you have to people, whether they be in the AFL industry, but people starting out? What advice do you have for people in life and how to be successful and to be happy?
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it? My answer, Ross, and I'm gleaning this from the probably 180 or so people that I have had the pleasure of recording a podcast with in the last couple of years. I think the common theme for me is the happy and successful and consistent people. They're really clear on what their day looks like, and they've got some sort of routine, and it's different for all of them. But I think all of them would form some sort of exercise. All of them would have some idea of being present or mindful or meditation. I think it comes in different ways, but all of them have got a really clear picture of connecting with their family and relationships and friends. And they might miss a day on all that. They understand diet and nutrition and eating well. So I think it's a pretty free hit to start there, to think about those things that you can do. Life's always going to, as Mike Tyson said, you've got a great plan until you get punched in the face. And it just happens. You always get punched in the face, but you're going to be able to bounce back if you know the things that make you feel healthy and happy, and get up with the sun, go to bed at a reasonable time. If you're smashing the alcohol regularly, I love a beer, but like everything you can do is going to, if you overdo it, going to cause you drama. So I think starting with them, finding something you love, finding a bit of purpose that you love that maybe contributes to someone else, maybe just not for you, but you do something that contributes to someone else would be, probably where I'd start.
You think finding a balance in between, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but finding a balance in between financial aspiration, but also a little bit of community contribution?
Oh, no doubt, Ross, at all. I think, there's a great saying I think of all the time. It's this idea of may you have enough, and once you've got enough, too much to me never brings more joy. I mean, being financially desolate and bankrupt, there's a lot of unhappiness in that, and not being able to look after your family is terrible. And so money's important, but there's a point in time where what more do you possibly need? And the search for that, and everyone wants a bigger boat, or everyone wants a better car, a better holiday, but then the curve of happiness doesn't get greater with that. In fact, I'd say the opposite of that. And then we've all met people that have got extreme wealth. That comes with a great baggage for your kids, to how do you teach them perspective if they've grown up not having to think about that as well. And, I really admire Warren Buffett's line, who just said, I think, for his 130 billion or whatever his current holdings is, I think he paid for his kids' school fees and that was it. And his line is, why would I take away from them the opportunity to have a great life by ruining it? And giving them all this money, and I think I skew much more to his line and thinking about, as you said, that what can he contribute maybe to someone else as being where happiness is more than anything else.
Well, the famous comedian Jimmy Carr said in an interview, he said, "Show me a kid with a trust fund, and I'll show you a tortured soul."
Couldn't agree with him more. And I know people and friends, great families, well intentioned, want to share their success with their kids. It makes sense until you see getting something for nothing is never a good thing. never in my mind. I think particularly when you're a young kid and you've grown up with not knowing any different, but the money and the wealth and the opportunities roll in, but you haven't earned it yourself. That's a great curse in life, and there's no sweet answer to that. But I think, yeah, I think you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. I think having that forced upon you, I'd say. A lot of people would think I'm the person that'll cope with that. That'll be fine. I often used to say, so I'll be the one that'll give me 100 million. I'll be fine. But I don't think it would. I think it would change everything. And I've seen that with friends of mine. I've seen how it changes everything. And yeah, I think having enough's probably a good place to start.
Luke, before we go, are there any new things on the horizon for you that we haven't heard about yet?
Oh, I appreciate you inviting me on and yeah, giving a plug to some of the things, and certainly not on the hard sell with Aleda or Sukhavati Bali or any of those things. But yeah, I love those spaces, and yeah, it's nice to connect with people that you hope by the end have a great experience out of it. It's where all the passion's going at the moment, and recording great stories hopefully, and on a weekly basis is something I really love. And thanks to again for having me on. So yeah, I think my hands are full with there, and a bit more free time, a bit more balance.
Look, Darcy, I know listening to the rub, Jason Dunstall may have disagreed with this at times, but you are an extraordinary person. You are doing extraordinary things. Thank you for giving us a bit of a preview into your life and how it's not just about one thing, it's about multiple things. And I think that you can be a real motivation for young people. So we really appreciate you having us
Nice,
into
nice to
your
catch
life
up.
today.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.